Hey everybody, Brad here in the Montana garage. I'm out working on the 55 Chevy project, trying like crazy to get this thing ready for Rocky Mountain Race Week. We have 26 days left. And yeah, she's still not a driver, but we're getting there. Today's video, mostly about everybody's opinions on setting the pinion angle. We'll figure out, I think just like everything else, there's 35 different ways to do that. We'll do a little research, we'll pick a way to do it, because I don't know. But we'll figure it out together, and maybe you'll learn something along the way. We gotta get the pinion angle set, we gotta tack the perches in place, then rip the whole rear end out of the car, and weld the perches on the housing. And that opens up a whole nother can of worms about how that should or shouldn't be done. Should you just weld the perches on? Should you put the thing in a jig? Should you hire a professional to do it? Should you preheat the whole tube so it all cools the same and minimizes the warpage? Everybody's got a different idea, and everybody tells you your way is probably wrong. But we got to pick a way because we got to get it done, because we got to drive this thing soon. So follow along and you'll find out how I decided to do it and how bad we screwed up. All right, first things first. We were dealing with an oil leak from the front of the oil pan. I have one of those one-piece, my brain, you know, it doesn't work. One-piece Fel-Pro oil pan gaskets. She was looking at the front gasket between the gasket and the timing cover. So I have since discovered, because of all you helpful folks out there, there's two different gaskets for the small block Chevy for that one piece. One has a thicker front seal, and I'm pretty sure I had the thinner one and need the thicker one. So that would explain why we have the oil leak. I didn't really find that information out until I was already through with trying to fix it. And my method of fixing it was to drop the pan. Well, you watch the video, watch the last video, and you'll see how I tried to fix it. Turns out I probably should just get a different oil pan gasket, but we let her set overnight. We came back in and dumped our oil. Remember I said I bet $100 I would spill this oil? Well, look at that. Actually, I didn't spill it. I don't know what happened. There must be like a microscopic hole in this thing, because it was just sitting here, and overnight, you know, quite a bit of it has now escaped the vessel somehow. So just my luck, now I have another oil mess to clean up, and I didn't even spill it. But the good news is I fired up the car and no oil leaks. So that's good, but now I'm a little, you know, I'm a little concerned in the brain, like should I be worried that I just have goop, you know, Permatex in there and it's just gonna start leaking? So I'm probably gonna source the right gasket, and if I have time, I'm gonna fix it. If I don't have time, I'll at least have it in the car so we can fix it along the side of the road in the middle of the night in a rainstorm somewhere in Nebraska. That sounds like a good idea. So now that we have the oil leak dealt with, we need to move on to the task we were planning on doing yesterday, and that is setting the pinion angle on the car. I have some instructions from Quick Performance. I'm gonna read through them again. I've also seen some different methods kind of, you know, on the old internet or whatever. So probably just follow Quick Performance's instructions and see if that works for us, and make sure it makes sense and it's all like, you know, seems like it's gonna work. I'm guessing they probably know a little bit more about it than I do. We'll follow the Quick Performance instructions. I bought myself a little digital angle grinder. I bought myself a little digital angle finder, so we'll use that to figure everything out. But the first thing we need to do is get the car setting on its weight. Now I know the car is not like full weight, so maybe that's gonna throw me off a little bit. You should have the car, you know, mostly built, and they even say to put like weight in the seat to simulate the driver. We'll maybe throw a little weight in there and see if that changes anything. These leaf springs are so stiff, I don't think the weight I'm gonna put in there is gonna change the, you know, the leaf spring that much. But we'll see what we come up with. But the first thing we need to do is we need to get it setting on its own weight. I imagine, like, I don't want 12 inches of, you know, boards under the rear tire and 6 inches of ramp under the front tire. So you need to keep that the same, because it needs to be like at ride height. I did get another set of these ramps that are the same. So I'm just gonna put the rear tires on the same ramps as the front tires. And theoretically that should get us maybe hopefully close enough-ish to take some measurements and see exactly where we're starting. Unfortunately, I just realized, I may not be able to use Quick Performance's method, because they take a measurement, I think, off the drive shaft, and I don't have my drive shaft because I'm getting a new one built, and for whatever reason they kept my old one, even though I'm starting from scratch with a new one. I just forgot to bring it home probably. Anyways, I digress. I'm complicating things before I even need to. Let's get the car setting level, and then we'll look at our instructions and see. They just take a measurement right off the drive shaft, I think. So we'll have to figure out where else to measure. I know we can do it without the drive shaft. First, I'm gonna clean up this oil that magically crawled out of the drain pan, so I don't track that everywhere. Get the underside of the car cleaned up, and we'll get her sitting level, sitting pretty, and start head scratching. Ooh, pretty. So in theory, I guess this should be ride height, right? I mean, it's setting on its wheels, it's just ride height plus about 6 inches. But it's tall enough for me to get under there and move around and do some angle finding and whatnot. I think it's gonna work. I will maybe throw the seats and the seat brackets, and maybe we'll throw a bunch of parts or something in the trunk just to kind of simulate a little bit of weight. And then we will crawl under there and figure out what kind of measurements we need to take. So the car's all up in the air and I'm ready to measure and figure out my pinion angle. So I go to the nice instructions I got from Quick Performance here, and I'm reading through this and it gets a bit confusing, but nothing a guy can't figure out. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. But one thing about it, like I mentioned earlier, I believe they take a measurement off the drive shaft. Like you actually put your angle finder on the drive shaft and use that for the little formula in here. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have my drive shaft. It is at the drive shaft shop. So I was thinking, well, maybe I got to wait to do this until they have the drive shaft so I could follow their method. I did a little looking because I know you can do it without the drive shaft. I thought I'd use their method, but I'm going to use a different method where we don't need the drive shaft. And in fact, as I was doing my research, plenty of people say, you know, the first thing you should do is get rid of your drive shaft, take it completely out of the equation. I mean, you don't have to take it out of the car, but take it out of the equation. You don't need your drive shaft angle to figure out your pinion angle. So we're going to do it a different way without using drive shaft. In simple dumbed down terms, the pinion angle is simply the relationship between the angle of the pinion and the angle of the drive shaft. I'll use this as my drive shaft. So if your drive shaft is dead straight out of there, you have 0 pinion angle. If your drive shaft is, you got a V, downward V, that's negative pinion angle, and like an upward V, that would be positive pinion angle. Now each suspension, each type of car is going to require a little bit of different setting for pinion angle, depending on if you got leaf springs or ladder bars or how much power you're making. You got an automatic, you got a 4-speed. So there's no dead set rule where they can say you need 4 degrees pinion angle or negative 4 degrees pinion angle. It's going to be different for every application, especially if you're racing. You just got to kind of, I don't know the best way to figure it out. I did some research and I figured out what I'm going to do based on the stuff I've read from other people. So I have Caltrax leaf spring suspension. Caltrax recommends between -2 and -4 pinion angle. So what they're saying is you want the pinion down -2 degrees based on the drive shaft. And the reason for that is when you hit the old go pedal in a leaf spring car, in theory, this is going to travel upward. If you're down like this and your pinion travels upward, that eventually is going to straighten it. So you're shooting for 0 at, you know, when you're under power. So you start a little negative, at least in my case. I don't know if that helps anybody or just confuses everybody. I know it's kind of confusing, but there's a bazillion videos out there that explain it better than me. I'm just trying to show you what I'm doing. So how do you measure all these stinking angles? Well, again, depending on whose video you watch or which instruction thing you listen to, there's a million different things to do it. So I got one of these handy dandy angle finders, and I got a digital one. I did already have, you could use one of these guys too, probably just not as accurate, or maybe not for me because I can't read the little lines, but that'll work too. I've seen lots of people using those. But you got to find a place to start and take your measurements off. A lot of people took a measurement off the harmonic balancer. I don't have room to do that in there. They would use a straight edge. I think that's probably a pretty good method because your crank center line is the same. So whatever degree you have there, it's going to be the same degree coming out of the transmission in theory, right? Unless something's screwed up. Some people said measure off the oil pan rails because that would give you the angle that the engine's sitting down. The carburetor is usually adjusted slightly up so that it can be level. People said to measure off of here. I did all that stuff and I get, you know, a different measurement every time. We'll crawl under the car and I'll show you what I actually measured in my case, and hopefully it's close enough. Now, before I give you my little explanation of what this is all about, just please remember that I really don't, I'm not an expert. I've never done this before. I'm just relaying to you what I've learned from other videos. So please do your own research and make your own decisions and set your stuff how you think you need to do it. I don't know if I'm right, so don't quote me on any of this, but this is how I'm doing it. Oh, so here we are in the confines of the dark under the car, and here's what my view is. That's the transmission tail shaft, and then obviously, whoa, over there we got the rear end yoke. So we need to find a way to measure, you know, the angle that the transmission is up or down or neutral or whatever it is. And I try to view different things. I got this thing has a little magnet on it somewhere, and there's no flat spots down here. Like I say, I tried the oil pan. Basically what I'm gonna go with is I got no drive shaft in my way, so I'm just gonna stick it right. I just stuck it right on the end of the tail shaft of the transmission. And I get within, you know, 1.1 or so every time. So that says 88.1, and it's down. If I lift the bottom up, we get to 90, which would be, you know, 0 in this, because we're using the sideways, you know what I mean. So I'm basically 2 degrees down, 1.9 right there. Depends on, like right there, I get 2 degrees down. So most often I get 2 degrees down. So I'm gonna go with 2 degrees down. That's the angle that my engine transmission combo is currently setting at. Then we'll come over here to the pinion, and this, granted, it's just, this is just eyeballed and bolted in with U-bolts. Nothing's welded in place. That's what I'm trying to figure out today, where it's gotta be so I can then weld it in place. So just how it sits here, I was at 88 degrees or -2 over there. And here this time it's telling me 88.6, and it also is down because if I raise the bottom up, we go up to 90. So I'm like, what would that be? 1.4 down right now. So what I need to be, if I'm 2 degrees down at the transmission, in theory, I need to be 2 degrees up over here to be zeroed out or, you know, neutral. I don't know what the correct term is, but I want 2 degrees. I'm going to start with 2 degrees negative. So if I wanted to be, so I'm at 88 over there, I'm confusing myself now. So I'm at -2 over there, which is basically 88 on the scale. To get to a +2 over here, which would zero it out, 2 degrees down from the transmission, 2 degrees up from the drive shaft, I have to rotate this up until it gets to, see it switches, it goes from 88 and then barely gets to 90, and then you see the numbers go the other way because it switches to the other axis or whatever. So now we have to get to 88 over there. So you can see how much I'd have to raise that, if you can see in there. Basically, I have to, you know, bloop, I have to put the pinion this direction, and I have to get back to where the scale says 88 again to get neutral. But I'm going to go with 2 degrees negative. So what I'm shooting for is right at 90 degrees on this bad boy. And so I got to loosen, try to get, it's pretty tough to hold it right at 90 because it switches, but right in there is where I'm looking for. So I got to raise this up just a couple degrees. I don't know if any of that makes sense or even if any of it's right, but that's the way I determined what I got to do. So I got to get under here, loosen the U-bolts just a touch, put a jack on here and jack it up until we get to the magic 90 degree number. And I think I'm pretty good, but while I'm doing this, I'm gonna kind of take some measurements side to side and just make sure, like right now, I think I measured off the leaf springs and the wheels are about the same, but I'm a little different on the body. I don't know, it's been a while since I did all that. So I'm just gonna verify all that in case the rear end needs to go a smidge one way or half a smidge the other way. Once we weld this in place, you know, it's pretty much at home. So I'm gonna loosen those bolts, rotate it up, and take some measurements, leftage and rightage. Then we'll show you what we came up with. I added a little bit of weight, threw some stuff in the trunk, put my seats in there. There's gonna be more weight on it, and yeah, the driver needs to be in there, and there's gonna be some fenders on there, but I went and kind of pushed on the front a little bit, made sure it was settled right. And it did change what I did by just like 0.2, I think, but I'm gonna leave it where it's at. Let's crawl underneath and take one more peek at where we're at. So I loosened everything up, I measured everything. I think I'm happy with where it is side to side. The wheel well, the tires are in the wheel wells just a hair different, but I think that's more of the body wheel well. That quarter panel's been cut in half and that sort of thing. They're pretty much right on the leaf springs, and if I measure from like this step on the axle to where the perch is, it's the same on both sides. I might check a few more measurements, but I think I'm gonna leave that how it is. And then as far as the old pinion angle goes, I got my tool on here. And as you can see, so this time, instead of doing all the mathicals, there's a 0 on here. So I'm gonna call that my 0 point. And now I'm shooting for -2 degrees negative pinion angle. And like I said, it changed it just a hair. I ended up with last time it said 2.3. So 2.2, 2.3, you know, it depends on how you hold it. So I had it set right at 2, and then when I tightened up the U-bolts, it raised it some, and then it ended up being like 1.8. So then I loosened everything and moved it back down, and I tightened it up, and it was right at, I think, 2.1. I left it a little bit low because I thought I was going to rotate up again, and it really didn't. It stayed at 2.1, and then I threw some weight in the car, and it switched to 2.3. I don't know. Calvert says between -2 and -4, so I'm just gonna, I got her tightened down right there. I'm gonna call that good, and I guess we will have to pull the wheels and tires and throw some tack welds on spring perches, and then we got to take the rear end out and pretty much strip it back down to where we started. Bummer, but I guess that's hot rodding. That's what you got to do. Put it together, take it apart, put it together, take it apart, and eventually you got to leave it together. I'm just not sure when I'm ever going to get to that point. Got to air down, baby. Hard to do one-handed. Smells like rubber. Had to get a little creative on this one. Well, she's fully disassembled, except for, of course, the U-bolts, which are still tight. I have to tack the leaf spring perches in place where I have them set for the pinion angle. And then I'll take the Caltrax bars off and then pull the whole rear end out and weld them solid. Like I say, there's a little bit of how you should do that, how you shouldn't do that out there on the old interweb. But I'm gonna sleep on it tonight. You know how I am with any major decisions. I gotta think about it, decide if I for sure wanna tackle this. Regardless whether I do it or not, I'll probably come out in the morning and do some practice welding just to see how I feel on this thick of metal. I think I can do her once I get my settings down, but there's the whole warp in the rear end thing to deal with, so we'll sleep on it. We'll see you guys in the morning, and we'll see what happens then. We are back out in the Montana garage. Next morning, it is Memorial Day, so everybody, hopefully you took a second. You're not going to see this till later, but today's Memorial Day. Take a second to remember the people that didn't make it home, and the reason you have all your freedoms and all that stuff. So anyways, we are out in the Montana garage, and I have my welding hat on, and I got my welding table out, and I got the welder out because I've been doing some practicing, because today's task is getting the spring perches welded on this rear end so we can put her together for the final time. All you guys that have been around here a while know that I can weld, but I'm a beginning, kind of learning, like non-expert type welder. So I always like to practice before I do something, especially if I haven't done very much of it. I haven't done a lot of welding on the thicker metal. So the axle housing tubes and the brackets are 1/4 inch thick or 025 metal. My machine will weld that, but it's supposed to be plugged into 240 volts to do that. My 240 volt outlet is over there, and my cord is right there. It's like 5 feet long, so I have to weld like right here if I'm welding 240 volt. I need a longer cord. I actually went to buy one today. It's like 180 bucks for a 20 feet cord, so now I remember why I don't have one. So we'll get the machine turned up nice and hot on 120 to do some tacks, and then we'll take it out and drag it over there. Most of the practice I'm doing is, you know, working on my technique and whatnot, but just trying to figure out the settings. My machine, even when I'm plugged into the 240, for 1/4 inch and 030 wire, which is what I have, it gives you a big blank square. So I think they want you welding it with 035. I only have 030, so, you know, I started at this setting, and then I had to kind of play with it a little bit to get to where I felt like it was hot enough and we weren't getting spatter all over or getting a bunch of undercut. And I think I got where I wanted. A lot of these are pretty ugly, but the last couple I did are pretty good. And let's see, we got some open corner welding to do. That piece I put down here, so I practiced some of that. Anyways, nothing super pretty, but I think we're hot enough and we're gonna make it work. So let's get the welder drug over there, get her turned up hot, tacky, and we'll go from there. So here's how things look with the axle all tore down and the wheels and everything out of the way. So what we gotta do is we gotta weld these perches on. I'm not sure the best way to go about it. You know, I could weld most of it in the car, but I can't get all of it. So that's why I've decided to take it out. I think for tacking purposes, I'm not sure the best way, but I think maybe I'll get it nice and hot and just burn in each one of these little corner pieces, you know, all 4 or all 8 if you count both sides, you know, and that'll I guess, hold her solid, and then we'll, you know, do this part once it's out of the car. I think I also will, these are the stackable lowering blocks from Calvert Racing. So I have 4 of them. I'm going to use 3 all the time for sure. The 4th one, we'll see, make sure we don't have any ground clearance issues. So I think I'll weld these bottom 3 together. I'll leave the top one loose until I find out for sure if it's staying. So while it's in the car, I might like buzz each corner of those a little bit, and then we'll stitch some welding on there when it's out also. So good, bad, right, wrong, I don't know, but that's my plan to do this because I got to get it done so I can get it back together. So let's get to it. All right, well, I think I did a pretty decent job on the little tacks. I guess I'm trying to show, you guys aren't up here, you guys are over here. So we just tacked each top corner. I think that should hold it good enough for me to get it moved around. And then these things, welding on those little lowering blocks is really weird. So I don't know, maybe those are a different kind of metal or something. The magnet sticks to them, but the guy told me you could, you know, stack them how you want them and weld them together, but I guess I just don't know how to weld them together, but we'll mess with those when it's out too, I guess. All right, I got the rear end out of the car and I'm all set up in my welding station, ready to go. I guess there's nothing left to do now but get my stuff on and pull the trigger and make this thing happen. I'm always a little apprehensive to weld stuff when it's the first time I've done something, and especially in this case, because just like everything else you might do on a hot rod or pretty much anything in life, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Should hope Moose didn't hear me say that. If you're looking for advice on the internet, you're going to get answers that range from yes to no. I mean, the whole gamut. Like, you can do it this way, you can't do it this way. One guy swears by it this way, the other guy says that'll ruin it for sure. So I don't know what's right, I don't know what's wrong. So I've been doing some research, and a lot of people say they're guys like me, they got a little welder, they're working on a car, they put it on some jack stands, they weld it in one weld, throw it back in the car and go racing. Done it several times, never had an issue. Another guy says that's terrible, you're gonna warp everything, your bearings are gonna be shot, your axles are gonna leak, you're basically just destroyed your rear end. And then the guy says, well, I've done it 12 times, never destroyed it. You know what I mean? You got the professional welder guys that say you need to put it in a jig and you should heat the tube cherry red, both sides around it, and weld it all at once, and then keep it hot and let it cool all together. Those guys are probably right and they know what they're talking about. I don't have the stuff to do that. You know, I don't have a oxyacetylene torch with a rosebud tip and then the jig to put it in, and I gotta kind of go with the other methods, like the guy in the shop that just does it. Then you got the guys that say you just weld an inch at a time, and then the professional welder guy comes on and says, no, if you do that, that's even worse, because every time you heat it and every time it cools, it warps. So if you weld an inch and it cools, it warps. You weld another inch, it cools, it warps. You're better off to do it, you know, in fewer welds, because you're gonna get less warpage, but then you're gonna create more heat, so it's gonna get more warpage. I don't know. I don't know. What's the right way to do it? Do you guys know? I don't know. I've watched several videos of guys just doing it this way out in their shop and welding it and putting their car together and going racing. Of course, I never have a follow-up video that says the car can't be aligned and the axle bearings are shot. So maybe that's happening and I just don't know about it, you know? So I don't know what to do. Should I call a professional? Should I take it somewhere? We don't really have like a race car. We have like some circle track guys around here, but if I take it somewhere, I don't know if they're just gonna set it on jack stands and weld it and charge me a couple $100 and give it back just like I'm gonna do. So I don't know if that's any better, you know? I wanted some real world advice from somebody I know. And so I called my brother-in-law, Justin, and he has a diesel mechanic shop here in Montana, and he builds some race cars, builds some really nice stuff. I really trust that guy. He knows his stuff. And maybe he's not like totally a welder, but he's done lots of welding. So I called him and said, do you have any real world experience welding spring perches on rear ends? And he said, well, yes, I do. And I said, tell me about it. And basically what he told me to do was just the thing where you don't weld too much and get it too hot. So his suggestion was, you know, you got to use a hot enough weld that you're going to get good penetration. So you can't try to cheat and use a cool weld so it's going to, you know, create less heat and warpage, because then the weld's just not good and you got to do it again anyways or create more heat. So he says use a good hot weld. What he does, he starts in the center and welds down to the edge of the perch in one pass. So that's maybe 2 inches of weld, where some guys say just to do 1 inch. So he does that and then goes to the other side, does the same thing, lets it set for a while till it's cool to the touch, half hour, whatever. Then he comes back and does maybe one on this side, and then, opposite. Lets it sit back and forth. So we're looking at 8 different welds. And he's done that several times and never had an issue. Never warped one enough that he noticed it, or that it caused any issues with his bearings or his seals, or that the car couldn't be aligned and all that stuff. So he said, yes, it's probably better to put it in some sort of jig and, do all the stuff. But what's the guy to do when you got to just do it? So I'm going to follow his advice and just do that and hope for the best. He also said, worst come to worst, if you do it and it warps, it can be fixed. They can cut the tubes and weld them straight, or they can put a little, they just heat like a quarter-size spot opposite of the warp, and it warps it the other way and pulls it back straight. So there's people that can fix it if it gets screwed up, apparently. But he tells me, just go for it. Don't really worry about it. Be careful. Don't get it too hot. And I should be fine. So I'm going to do that. What do you think? Right? Wrong? Let me know. Oh, back to the 9 ways to skin a cat. Some people's version is you leave the axles in there, because then that acts as kind of your jig and it holds it all straight. But then again, just like everything else, other people say, well, you got enough tolerances in those axles, it's not going to really make a difference, and you're going to do more harm to your axle bearings by heating them up than you're going to do good to your housing by keeping it straight. Again, who's right? I don't know. But I decided to take it all apart. I got to take it apart to paint it anyways. So I got the axles out, obviously. I wish I wouldn't have I have the axle seals in there, and I probably should just pop them out, but they're gonna get destroyed and then you have to get new ones. So hopefully with my little, couple different welding, 8 different times, we're not gonna create a whole bunch of heat and those won't get destroyed. I think I may have a bucket of water and rags here. I think I'm gonna put a wet rag in here. Hopefully that'll keep the axle seal cool enough and keep it from melting. I guess if we got to replace them, it's not that big a deal probably, but that's my theory on that deal. So I guess the time is now. Enough jibber jabber. I'm going to set the welder up and make my first weld, and we'll cry about it later. There goes nothing. Let's see what I'm doing. Actually was doing pretty good. I stopped there. Because then I didn't do so good after I stopped. I like to pull or push my weld usually rather than pull, but he said to start in the center and work your way down. I don't know if it would have mattered, but didn't do super great on the first one, but it's welded. Number 2, I'm going to try to push it down this time so I can see the puddle better. That time it was hard to change angles as I went. I think I'd be more comfortable pushing it up. All right, I guess the theory says let it set for a little bit so it gets good and cool. So we'll do it. All right, I feel like I can make a better weld if I weld uphill, so I don't know if it really matters if there's a reason to go center and down. I'm gonna try this one down, bottom to center, just because I feel like I can see my puddle better, and I think that's gonna help me out. I don't know if it will or not. We'll find out here in a second. Kind of awkward, this flange here. Trying to decide exactly how to have my hand. Stopped a little shy of center, I guess. I thought I was almost going too far. It's a little warm in there by the seal, but I think we're still good. Alright, I just did this one side, but I pushed the wrong button, took a picture instead of a video. I guess what I'm doing is, on the inside ones I'm starting at the top and pushing the puddle down. On the outside ones I'm starting at the bottom where I'm pulling the puddle down. On the outside ones I'm pushing the puddle up. I'm a little more comfortable with the pushing, but the welds just end up looking a lot different. So it means I started this way. I'm going to try to finish this way if I can get comfortable enough and figure out the right way to do it. Cover this up. And so I got some air. So I think I want to. And it's just so much easier just to go like that. I might have to just do that because, like in the wrong, be over here maybe. Then I just can't, I'm pushing, and the puddle's in front of me and it's blocked by my torch, so I can't see it. So I need to be like this, but then I gotta kind of do it left-handed, and that's probably not good for me. We'll try that. Not the best. Yeah. Update time. This little welding project. I didn't spend much time on it, but it's the end of the day. It's getting a little bit, it's evening, getting dark out. So I, of course, did not get near as much done as I wanted to and or needed to over this Memorial Day weekend. My original plan was to have this welded, painted, and back in the car before we got to today. And it's today and it's welded. It's not painted and it's definitely not back in the car, obviously. So I am really starting to have some doubts about the whole Rocky Mountain Race Week thing. Time's getting short. I'm busy next weekend. So I either got to buckle down or throw in the towel. I'm not ready to throw in the towel yet, so we'll keep rolling, I guess. Now let's take a look at my welds. I don't think they turned out too bad. All right, obviously those aren't my welds. That's from the Quick Performance guys, and those welds are good. Anywho, mine aren't quite as pretty, but hopefully they're gonna hold the perches in place. This is probably the ugliest one because I couldn't see. I explained it when I was welding. Just hard time seeing the puddle when I'm going a certain way. So this one was all starting in the center and kind of pulling the puddle downhill. Same thing there. So the weld's a little flatter. And then over here, I started at the bottom and pushed the weld up. And I still got a good weld. It's just, and I think it's hot enough. It's just a little more crowned when you're going the uphill direction. But I feel like I got a pretty decent weld on it, both sides. So again, I did this inside, pulling the puddle down. And then out here was pushing the puddle up. And again, it's just a little more crowned, maybe a little more than I would like. This side's better. Obviously I didn't grind anything. I did him with a wire wheel. This could have cleaned off, and I went along and knocked off most of my spatter. There wasn't a ton of it. And let's see. Let's roll it on down. And we'll lift her up the other side here. So here I did a little brake tab, another little brake tab, and then this guy Weld was way too cold when I first started doing this. But that's where the one of the brake lines comes on from the frame. Then I threw 3 little studs on here to secure down the brake line as it goes across top. So, took longer than I thought and planned, but I think it's done right, hopefully. I don't know. I took my time, nothing got super hot. I don't think the inner seals seem like they're fine. It never got too hot in there. And I don't know, I never took any measurements on it before, so I don't know how you tell if it got warped, but I guess when I put the axles back in, if they don't line up or something, then I'll know something was screwy. Anywho, hopefully I didn't screw it up. I'm not sure what I got going on. I got to clean up a little bit more, and then probably what I'm going to do is just try to get this degreased and sanded a little bit and ready to paint it. I'm not going to paint it tonight because it's getting to be, I don't know, it's 10 o'clock or something. So anyways, we'll keep giving her a little bit longer, and then, I don't know, we'll be back when we're painting the rear end or doing something exciting.